The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Who's recording this?
Hello to everyone who's joining us at the Boosting Achievement of Children in Care, Understanding and Supporting Neurodiversity for Parents and Carers, today's webinar. I can see the number of attendees is creeping up as I'm speaking, so if you'd like to type in who you are and where you are, it'd be really nice to see where we've got people coming in from. Also, you can tell us what the weather's like with you, if it's snowing where you are, if you're under 6 inches of snow at the moment. Here I'm in sunny Somerset and it really is sunny. You would never know that it's been snowing anywhere else in the country. But everybody else we've been speaking to has got at least 3 or 4 centimetres. So do let us know what it's like where you are. We'll be starting the webinar up in about 5 minutes. So as I say, do type in and let us know who you are. Oh, there's a message. I can see somebody in sunny Gosport. Debbie is a foster carer, lives in sunny Gosport. Hiya, Debbie. Nice to hear from you. Nice to welcome you to the webinar today. Who else have we got with us? Use the questions box on your control panel to type in and say who you are and where you are. Remember that the questions box can be used all the way through the webinar. We are taking questions at the end of the session, but if you'd like to ask anything during the session itself, all you have to do is type in a question and we can save it for later. Or I can type in an answer as we're going. So we've got Marion and Gavin there as well. Hedge End, sunny and bright. Heather Garrett from Gillingham. Hi, Heather. Nice to see you or to hear from you. Borders, lots of snow. That's from Anne. I've just been finding out how to expand my questions box because it was. Heather is asking, why is her microphone muted? Heather, your microphone should be muted. People who attend the webinars have muted microphones because you can't speak during the sessions. The only way to actually ask questions is by typing them into the question box. So Carol is in Galashiels in the Scottish borders and has about 10 centimetres of snow with drifting. Oh, sounds cold. My brother's up that way as well, Carol. So yeah, sympathise. Faye from Cambridgeshire, chair of Pinpoint, the Parent Carer Forum for Cambridge. That's great. Trustee of the BDA. Looking forward to the webinar. That's great. Anne is also in the Scottish borders. Nice to hear from you, Anne. So we're coming up to 12:30. We'll be starting the webinar off at 12:30. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably with cups of tea or cups of coffee and ready to go. I can see more people joining us. So guys, if you've just joined us, do feel free to type into the question box and tell us who you are and where you are. It's good to hear from you. You'll notice, everyone, that there are handouts attached to today's session, so please do access those. It will be particularly useful for you to have access to the support strategies booklet and also for the training notes for parents and carers. If you're able to access the neurodiversity profiler as well, that will be useful as we're going through the slides later on. Welcome to everyone who's been joining us over the last few minutes. We'll be starting the webinar up in about 2 minutes when we get to 12:30, just giving everybody time to join in. If you'd like to type in who you are and where you are, it would be good to know. We've got Nigel McCartney here, Suffolk foster carer, education champion for Suffolk, snowy Suffolk. Hi, Nigel. And Marion and Gavin in Christchurch. No snow, but very cold. Yeah, here too. And we're also welcoming Faye from Cambridgeshire. Hello there, Faye. Just a reminder again that all of the handouts are attached to the webinar control box, so please do access those before we get started. Okay, everybody, it's 12:30. So welcome to today's webinar, Boosting Achievement of Children in Care, Understanding and Supporting Neurodiversity for Parents and Carers. My name's Liz Horrobin, I'm from the British Dyslexia Association, and I'm very pleased to welcome here today again our presenter, Jenny Price, who works for Patos. Jenny is also a specialist assessor and specialist teacher who works in Suffolk and Norfolk schools. She's worked in her local authority, excuse me, developing and leading specialist teams supporting children with a range of neurodiverse presentations. One particular area of interest for Jenny was developing a personalised response to the education of looked after children and young people. Jenny's recent work has been developing the child and educational psychology practice where she is in Norfolk. The specialist team works closely with a range of social care, health and educational professionals in assessment, intervention, planning and delivery, training and detailed diagnostic work. You are in very safe hands today with Jenny. So Jenny, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you very much, Liz, and welcome to everyone. Now, my understanding is that we would be really interested to know who you are, and there will be a poll popping up on your screen, which would be useful if you could just tell us. So thank you for doing that in advance. So the training that we're going to share this afternoon has been designed by the British Dyslexia Association in partnership with Patos and Bernadette McLean, the former CEO of Helen Arkell. It's been funded by the DFE, and the training aims to raise awareness of specific learning differences and the impact that these have, especially when they go unrecognised. We're going to present a range of strategies for parents and carers to support children and young people at home. The session is divided into 3 parts. And in the first part, we're going to look at the concept of neurodiversity and how it can help with our understanding of specific learning difficulties. We're going to share a new animation about dyslexia and discuss how its message applies more broadly across the neurodiversity spectrum. The second part of the session will look at some of the issues facing many looked after children and young people in education. And the third part explores ways of identifying and supporting the needs of children and young people who are exhibiting often behaviours that we associate with specific learning difficulties. Our next slide, thank you. The term neurodiversity was first coined around 1998, and since that date, it has come to mean different things to different people. To some, neurodiversity still applies only to the autistic community, and even specifically to high-functioning autism. To others, it refers to anyone who has a learning difference, such as dyspraxia or dyslexia, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, and so on. However, we would like to take a broader view of the term. And we'll have a look at this quotation, which summarizes how the American writer and academic Nick Walker defines neurodiversity. Neurodiversity refers to the enormous differences in human minds. This is due to many factors, such as environment, culture, family, and personal history. Human minds interact with all these factors to produce the unique individuality of each human being. Notice that Walker includes the environmental and personal factors in the development of the human mind. He goes on to say, brains differ from each other just like fingerprints. This diversity gives us all individual styles, strengths and weaknesses, gifts and peculiarities. This is what we mean by neurodiversity. Note that Walker is including everyone in the human species in this definition of neurodiversity. This is an important point. He isn't just speaking about people who have learning differences. He sees everyone as being part of the spectrum and is calling out for us to respect all the differences which are innate within our species. This view actually presents a radical shift from traditional ways of viewing learning differences. Often, those who learn or think differently have been classed as having a disorder. The neurodiversity movement, on the other hand, asks us to view these differences as a normal part of human variation and as valuable to human diversity in the same way as different types of plant or animal life are valuable to biodiversity. So within the spectrum of neurodiversity are learners who may be identified as having specific difficulties. These could be dyslexia, developmental language disorder, which was previously known as specific language impairment, or SLI, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, or dyscalculia. Of course, there are other conditions such as Tourette's syndrome, which could also be included in this diagram. But what's important to realise is that learning differences such as these do not occur in isolation. Back in 2001, the American academic Bonnie Kaplan stated, "In developmental disorders, comorbidity is the rule, not the exception." When she said this, Kaplan was acknowledging that learning differences overlap, and they do so to the extent that each individual has a unique profile which may combine traits from a number of these different conditions. Consequence of this view is that we can't regard people with dyslexia or dyspraxia or ADHD as being a homogeneous group, in the same way as we can't view people who don't have a specific difficulty as being homogeneous. Rather, we have to see each person as unique, with their own distinctive profile of strengths and co-occurring challenges. Now, for further information about each of these conditions, there is an excellent guide to SpLD available free on the BDA website. Now, we're now going to watch a short animation. It's been produced to increase understanding of dyslexia. However, the underlying messages within this animation apply to many other specific differences. I hope you enjoy watching it.
Your brain is amazing, and nobody else has one quite like it. Although everybody's brain looks the same, they all work differently from each other. Just as we all have different colour skin, hair, and eyes, we all have a brain that's individual to us. Like a fingerprint, we have different personalities, tastes, strengths, and weaknesses. Our brains can even see and understand the world in different ways. One of those ways is called dyslexia, which affects how the brain handles information it sees and hears. Dyslexic people may find it difficult to match letters to sounds, and to remember how to spell words. They may even see letters moving around when they're reading. They might have trouble telling left from right. Remembering lots of instructions can be especially hard. They may need more thinking time to remember the right word.
Chicken! No, wait! Look!
As well as memorizing sequences. It may be difficult for them to hold a pencil and to write by hand. Even organizing themselves can be difficult. But everyone with dyslexia is different. It can affect how people feel about themselves. When they struggle with a task that other people find easy, they may feel frustrated, angry, or sad. Some dyslexic people try to hide their difficulties because they are worried about what others will think of them. However, thinking differently can be a really good thing. A person with dyslexia may be very good at seeing patterns and solving problems, imagining and rotating objects in their heads, telling stories and making people laugh, taking things apart, understanding how they work, and figuring out how to put them together again. Inventing, drawing, painting, and making things. Seeing the bigger picture. Dyslexic people can do a lot of things. They just might do them in a different way to how others would, and many of them have even become famous for it. There have been many famous dyslexic inventors, writers, scientists, business people, astronomers, paleontologists, actors, cooks, singers, artists, architects, and so on. Dyslexic people have changed the world. See dyslexia differently.
Excellent, thank you very much. And that particular YouTube is available for you to view at any time. If you just go on to the BDA website, the link will be there. Why we wanted to share that with you was that we recognise that many of the traits associated with dyslexia, such as slower processing skills and visual stress, weak working memory, embarrassment, anger and frustration, are also experienced by children and young people with other different types of difficulties, such as dyspraxia or ADHD. It's also the case that those with other specific difficulties can have strengths and talents in other areas that we also need to recognise and encourage. And we would be interested to know what you think about the animation. Perhaps you'd like to tell us at the end of the session when we take questions. So moving on, we recognise that it's important to note that not all learning difficulties arise from specific learning differences. And it is not the intention of this training to imply that this is the case. For example, fetal alcohol syndrome disorder and attachment issues may play a crucial role in the child's development. And we recognise that it is beyond the scope of this training to cover all these conditions, but we know that it's important that parents and carers are both cognizant of them and alert to the possibility that they may be present in the profile of a young person. It's equally important to note that not all research focuses on negative outcomes for young people who have experienced trauma. Post-traumatic growth has attracted research interest. Although the adversity hypothesis is well established, researchers have tended to focus on the negative consequences of traumatic or stressful events. This is post-traumatic stress disorder. What we're focusing on here is the literature that explores post-traumatic growth. However, it refers to 3 reported benefits following adversity, which are finding strength and abilities, improving good relationships, and making a positive change in priorities and philosophies. Literature and research evidence is mixed when it comes to explaining the link between PDG and well-being. 3 main hypotheses have been put forward, which are that post-traumatic growth leads to positive life changes, and this in turn improves well-being. It does lead to life changes, but this is stressful and so can also lower well-being. And the final one is that PDG is a coping strategy, and its effectiveness as a strategy to cope mediates the relationship between PTG and well-being. So we can see that the research is rather inconclusive as to which hypothesis is accurate. So what then can we draw on for looked after children? Well, giving them a sense of worth, security and positive role models can only enhance and increase their life chances. Research illustrates that the sense of belonging that comes from a shared emotional connection, membership, positive influences, and reinforcement is absolutely crucial. In a home where education is valued and care is taken to value and nurture learning, we give children and young people the very best opportunities. We know many children thrive as good foster care can and does make a difference. So what are the issues? For our second part of the session, we're going to consider the issues behind the training, in particular, the educational outcomes for looked after children. As carers, we want all foster or adoptive parents and carers also want the best for the children and young people in their care. However, we recognise the importance of the challenges that we face. Our next slide gives us some data. It presents percentages of looked after and other children who reach the expected standards at Key Stage 1, 2 and 4. Each of the figures represents 10% of children. The red figures are children in care and the blue children not in care. As a looked after child progresses through school, statistics show that they are likely to fall even further behind than their peers. The information is taken from national statistics provided by the Department for Education. According to those statistics in 2017, at Key Stage 1, an average of only 53% of looked after children are achieving the expected standard in reading, writing, maths and science. This is in comparison with 78% of non-looked after children. At Key Stage 2, the picture has deteriorated, with only 39% of looked after children achieving the standard across tests of reading, writing, maths and SpAG, which is spelling, punctuation and grammar. This compares with 67% of other children. By Key Stage 4, the picture is worse still. Only 14% of looked after children achieved 5 or more GCSEs at grade A* to C, compared with 53% of non-looked after children. Progress at Key Stage 4 is now measured through Attainment 8. Here the average score for a looked after pupil is only 23, compared with 48 for a non-looked after pupil. Generally then, it can be seen that the outcomes for looked after children worsen as they progress through school. It's worth noting, but the time these young people leave school, the situation worsens again. In 2017, of care leavers aged 19 to 21, 40% were not in education, training or employment. That's our NEET group. This compares with 13% of all other 19 to 21-year-olds. At the same time, the percentage of looked after children identified as having special educational needs stands at 57% compared with 14% in the non-looked after population. And 27% of looked after children have an education, health and care plan compared with only 3% of other children. Interestingly, the largest proportion of looked after children in this group with an EHCP are identified as experiencing social, emotional and mental health issues. This is followed by moderate learning difficulties and speech and language and communication needs in that order. However, a recent survey found that teachers agreed that unidentified dyslexia can have a huge toll on an individual's self-esteem as their literacy skills fall further and further behind. This suggests that although social, emotional, mental health issues are the most frequently identified, they may, in some cases, be exacerbated by unidentified specific difficulties, such as dyslexia or dyscalculia or dyspraxia. So let's think about the 5 key issues. We've already covered a considerable amount of research and data, and that is something you may wish to reflect upon afterwards. How do you feel about those statistics? But these key issues listed by the Social Exclusion Unit are for consideration. What could be some of the causes for children missing out on their education? What will be the impact on their learning and their social, emotional and mental health? And most importantly, what is it that we can all do to help this situation? So the next thing we want to look at is understanding the behaviour in the home. This is the third and final part of the session. One of the key aspects of the neurodiversity movement is looking beyond the label and understanding the strengths and talents that make up each individual profile. When we're looking at the profile of a child or young person, it is important to see beyond surface appearances, not just for the reasons that may underlie outward-facing behaviour, but also for the strengths and talents that may be hidden below the surface. One of the greatest challenges for the non-expert is to know the signs to look out for that may indicate that a child or young person is at risk of dyslexia or another learning difficulty. One of the risks is that because of a fear of wrongly labelling a child, no action is taken. So to help avoid this situation and to provide a framework through which to observe behaviour that are often associated with specific difficulties, we've developed the neurodiversity profiler. You will have a hyperlink from the training materials which will take you to the profiler. But what I want to do is just show you how it can work for you. Okay. So I'm hoping that you can all see it. And you will notice at the bottom of the screen, there are 4 tabs. There's an introduction, which takes you through the usage of the profiler. There's a section on support strategies for the different types of difficulties that we may find. There is a part that's been designed specifically for the young person to be taken through with an adult. And then there's the final part, which can be used for professionals with foster carers to work through and really think about and focus on particular areas of difficulty. Now you'll notice on the left-hand side there is a column, and these are divided into different potential areas of difficulty. I'm just scrolling down just to show you and give you a rough idea what's happening there. Now, when you're working through it with a young person, and I'm going to take us back up to the top, you may not want these to be visible, so you can just easily move these across on your screen so that you've just got the question section to ask the child. So the idea is that the professional using this, maybe in conjunction with you as the foster carer, most probably it will be with class teachers for primary age children. It's worth just pointing out at this point, there are profilers for the early years children, primary children, secondary and post 16. So there's a good range according, which have been developed according to the phase and developmental stage of the child. We're looking at the neurodiversity profiler for a primary school age child. So we would be thinking about the child in terms of whether they find it difficult perhaps to hear different sounds in words. And in the final column here, we can click and get a choice. Now, very often children do have difficulties if they have a speech and language problem. So you might be selecting sometimes or often. The next question would be, do you find it difficult to remember instructions? Often. The answer there. Find it difficult to remember the correct word to describe things? Again, often. So let's do this one. Sometimes pronounce words wrongly. So scrolling over, click on the box. Yeah, that happens to me quite often. Do I need longer to say the answer to a question? Most definitely. Prefer to listen to other people rather than start a conversation? Not always. So sometimes perhaps. Okay, so once we've collected up the question answers that are pertinent to the particular area of perceived difficulty, We can then go back up to the top and filter, and I'm interested in the answers to the questions which are often and sometimes, and by clicking on there, it condenses the whole thing so that we've got the particular profile for that child. So as you can see, there's a huge range of pertinent questions to run through, and we would really advise you to spend time investigating this. Now, it has been designed primarily for the use of professionals. However, input from the child or young person and you is essential. Therefore, some familiarity with its use is definitely needed. So have a go and see how powerful a tool this could potentially be for building a holistic picture. Most important, though, is to remember that it is a collaborative process. The first step should always be to fully explain and clearly identify the purpose of the profiler, to understand how it works and how the results will be used. And the profiler is just part of the process which aims to provide suitable and relevant follow-up support for that child or young person. Therefore, it's crucial that any appropriate actions are followed up. This could be further assessment or support mechanisms and or interventions in their education. So we hope that the profiler will give a greater understanding for both the individual of their own neurocognitive profile, for you as carers, and for the professionals who work with them. It's important to know that it's available as a free tool and can be used by social workers, virtual school teams, the school SENCO, and or the designated teacher. And if a child hasn't been through this profiling process, you could draw attention to the school or to the social worker, and they may wish to take the child or young person through it. So just to reiterate, it's got a full introduction that talks you through it in a far more coherent way than I have. It's got the part A that's designed for the adults to do. If you're working with older learners, it might be appropriate in many cases to sit with them and work through it together. It's got the specifically designed age-appropriate questions for the child. And finally, it's got some go-to immediate strategies that could be put in place if these types of difficulties are perceived to be the main problem. So moving back now to our main presentation again, I'd like to introduce you to some case cameos. We're looking here at 8 case cameos. Josie, 5, Olly, who's 7, Daisie, 8, Connor, 9, Ali, 11, Dan, 12, Amy, 15, and Carly, 17. And all share possible unidentified specific learning differences. Now, for each of our case cameos, upheaval in their lives has caused feelings of anxiety. And this, quite often coupled with feelings of guilt, can cause behaviour to deteriorate and learning needs to become increasingly concerning. This situation can only be worsened if the child or young person is struggling with unidentified learning differences, which are making their life at school problematic. Each of these case cameos is an opportunity to consider what strategies might be appropriate to increase the support that can be provided at home. Now, we wouldn't suggest working through all the examples. You should choose the case cameos whose ages are most relevant to you. Each of them have a background story. There is the neurodiversity profiler, parts A and B, and there are examples of one-page profiles. There's the booklet support strategies for parents and carers, and there's the guide to specific learning difficulties that you can download. So together, we're going to consider 3 of the case cameos from across the age range. And we're going to start with Olly. Now, Olly is 7 years old and he's been in care with the same family since he was 4. He has an August birthday and so is one of the youngest in his Year 3 class. However, because he's quite a large child, he looks older than his age. He mentions that when he reads, he can't keep his place at the end of a line, and he often jumps more than one line and then becomes very muddled. There are no identified sight issues, although he does have a weak eye muscle in the right eye, for which he has been given exercises. This has helped the problem, but it has not yet resolved it. Olly is also left-handed, and when younger he had difficulties with activities such as jigsaw puzzles and colouring and drawing. He also had problems tying his shoelaces, and this made him very frustrated and angry, and he attributed this to the fact that he is left-handed. At school, Olly has difficulties with following verbal instructions, and he seems to find it hard to concentrate. He has complained that he finds it impossible to learn his times tables, even in Year 3, even though he's actually very good at maths. He also has difficulties copying from the board, and this is having an effect on his ability to keep up with classwork. Olly has recurrent ear infections and glue ear, and his hearing is tested quite often. At the last check, he was considered to be within the normal range. Glue ear has resolved without grommets. In spite of this, Olly often mumbles and doesn't always hear sounds normally. He can mishear words and get things wrong, but when he's hearing correctly, he fully understands. He loves playing Minecraft and all sports and enjoys nature programs about animals. He's interested in science and space and he enjoys doing experiments. Now let's have a look at strategies. And this is not a definitive list because there are others that you would want to add. So for his ongoing hearing difficulties, it's pretty critical that his hearing is rechecked. For motor skills, there's a range of specific tools designed for left-handed users. For his reading difficulties, it would be worth checking out with an optometrist whether there's any visual stress. Also, we could show Olly how to use a bookmark or ruler to help him keep his place when reading. And in the interim, why not try using different coloured overlays or tinted paper? We know that Olly has difficulty following instructions. Giving one instruction at a time and asking him to repeat back what you've said, and making sure that his teacher and the adults that support him know about his memory difficulties. Now, learning times tables. We know that Olly finds rote learning difficulty, so teach him how to use resources such as multiplication squares to support his understanding, and negotiate with the school for Olly to be allowed to use a calculator alongside utilising concrete apparatus to embed his understanding of multiples. If he's asked to copy from the board, well, maybe Olly could be provided with his own copy so that he doesn't have to keep looking up and then back down. So, for example, an alphabet arc on his table so that he doesn't need to keep looking up to the alphabet frieze that may not be that easy for him to see. Or maybe a word mat that he can use to write on with key vocabulary rather than having a list of spellings on a blackboard. For self-esteem, let's talk to Olly about his learning difficulties and ensure that he knows he is not stupid. He learns differently from others, and there are a number of approaches that schools can take that upskill them to help manage children with emotional difficulties. Now, these are not the only ways of supporting Olly. It's important to tailor intervention and support knowing the context and the options. Remember, that is what Pupil Premium Plus funding can be used for. And with a neurodiversity profiler, you can begin to look at those strengths and weaknesses for him. So moving on to our next case cameo, this is Dan, and Dan is 12 and has been in foster care since he was 7. He was initially unhappy with his new family as he has been separated from his sister, to whom he was very attached. And there is no contact now between these siblings. And although Dan used to talk about his sister, he hasn't mentioned her for a long time. Primary school was actually uneventful in terms of Dan's achievement. He mastered early decoding and without effort learned his timetables. Sometimes comments were made about his lack of understanding in maths and reading comprehension activities, but he didn't receive any investigation or support for these observed difficulties. Dan has a history of speech and language problems as a child, and he still mumbles a lot in his speech, but little is known about whether he received any therapy for these difficulties as a child, and there are no written reports that are known of. He's not very talkative and tends to just shrug his shoulders if asked how he's getting on at school. Dan is now in his first year at secondary, and his new school seems to expect more in the way of achievement, and this, combined with the increased curriculum and a range of teachers, is clearly beginning to cause more pressure. Because there are no siblings for his carers to compare him with, they are unsure of his progress. But they have noticed that he is now spending more time in his room with his PlayStation rather than joining them for some television shows that they have previously shared together. There is no evidence that he is forming friendships in his new school, and few other children from his previous school have transferred to this particular high school. Dan's carers have also noticed that he's becoming a bit picky about his eating, as well as showing little interest in his appearance. They're beginning to worry about adolescence and emotional problems. What we know is that when he was younger, Dan relished opportunities to play sport. And his carers are going to try to encourage and facilitate this. They would like him to take up these interests again in his new school. So let's look specifically at what the priorities are. Well, social and behaviour has to be a big one. So trying to arrange leisure activities which involve sport and the opportunity for Dan to build up friendships based on shared interests. Perhaps an activity for Dan where he asks children from his new class could be arranged, especially if he has an upcoming birthday. What about playing board games? Nothing taxing, but simply involving turn-taking and creating a non-threatening opportunity that he can engage in simple conversation. Involving Dan in household activities such as preparing meals or gardening. And definitely discussing the anxiety issues with Dan's social worker. Now, if we're suspecting learning difficulties, it's important to talk to Dan's school about comprehension and his language. Maybe further investigation, as there are no records from his early childhood. And find out what support is available and what extracurricular activities might be appropriate. Maybe there's a homework club where he could do his homework with some of his peers in a supportive environment. Okay, and our final case study. This is Chelsea on our next slide, and she's 17. Now, she's had many moves of school since she was 9 years old. The types of school have varied between very small village schools, large primaries, a pupil referral unit, and finally a newly opened academy. But she didn't do well in her GCSEs and has just started a hairdressing course at her local FE college. Chelsea has no contact with her parents. She remembers that her mum was a hairdresser and she has always been fascinated by hair colours and styles. She has excellent practical skills, quickly picking up how to make and create when it's a hands-on activity. This extends to an enjoyment of all practical activities at home, such as cooking and baking. However, she does get stressed with too many instructions, and when this happens, she can get very emotional and argumentative. She's also becoming stressed by some of the technical requirements of her course, such as applying ratios when preparing hair dyes. And her tutor has noticed that she reverses numbers, so 12 becomes 21. And whenever maths is required, Chelsea freezes. Chelsea says that maths is a waste of time and nothing to do with hairdressing. And she is questioning why she has to do more when she hated the subject at school. Chelsea's neurodiversity profiler has indicated that she is dyslexic and has particular difficulties with auditory and visual spatial memory. This appears to be the main cause of her difficulties and the frustration with maths and her problems retaining instructions. Chelsea's neurodiversity profile is within the training notes for you as a single-page profile within the appendix. So let's look at some of the support strategies that we decided would give Chelsea the best chances. Well, with her maths difficulties, it's important that she does crack this problem of ratios and measurements, especially for hair colouring. So maybe interests such as cooking to practice using ratios and measurements would work. For her difficulties with memory, it's really important that we don't give her too many multiple instructions simultaneously. We need to break information into small chunks, and wherever possible, use visual reinforcements, pictures, to support verbally presented or written information. For her moodiness and arguing, well, trying to understand and empathise with the root causes of these issues will help. Supporting rather than criticising her difficulties with maths and memory, and boosting her self-esteem by encouraging her to do the things that she is good at, reminding her that her difficulties are not due to her being stupid. They are because she learns differently to others. And using positive role models, perhaps celebrities who are dyslexic, to boost her confidence. So as we move towards the end of the presentation, we just want to show you and talk about some generic issues which can affect individuals with specific learning difficulties. Now, we know these include attention deficit, weak memory skills, processing issues, and low self-esteem. So what are the support strategies listed here, and why are they appropriate? Well, using simple, clear language helps us to support those with developmental language difficulties, such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, and ASD. Asking the child or young person to repeat back what you've said to them is a helpful way to check that they've retained the instruction. Remember that individuals with SpLD can have weak short-term and working memory, so chunking information and instructions into one step at a time will help to ensure there isn't an overload. Slower processing skills are a feature of many difficulties, so allow extra time for information to sink in and give the child or young person time to formulate a response. Try to avoid rushing them or interrupting their thought processes before they have a chance to give you an answer to your questions. All children and young people are likely to experience frustration and even anger as a result of the experiences that they have. Those who have to deal with the additional stress of being in care are likely to be even more prone to these feelings. So understanding that their challenging behaviour is key to deal with is also to remember that other behaviours may have their origins in specific learning difficulties. So our next slide really communicates to us that communication is key. We need to speak to the child or young person and try to find out what makes them tick by showing that we're really interested, by listening carefully to what they have to say, by finding out what works for them, what they enjoy doing, and respecting their differences. So in summary, just as biodiversity is essential to the well-being of the planet, so neurodiversity is essential to the success of our species. Demonstrate that you fully embrace this idea and recognise the ways in which all our lives are enhanced and enriched by diversity. Help the children and young people in your care to see that they have a role to play and they are valued for it. Now, if you're using this training with groups and you want to look at different profiles, here they all are. So whizzing quickly through, there's Josie, age 5. And here are strategies that would support Josie. There's Daisie, aged 8, and strategies to support Daisie on the next slide. And then we meet Connor, aged 9, strategies for Connor. There we go. And here's Olly, who's 11. Strengths and weaknesses there, and strategies that would support Olly. And Amy, who's 15, very interesting young person, Amy, and the support strategies. All of these have in-depth profiles and further information for you to use. These are just a quick overview. So moving on. These slides list the websites of the principal UK charities who support children and young people with specific learning difficulties. So important information for your future reference. And furthermore, there we go, the internet links for further resources. And that brings us to the conclusion of the webinar for this morning, and we've time for some questions.
Thank you very much for that, Jenny. So I'm just have problems moving on from to slide. There we go. Yeah, thank you very, very much for that, Jenny, and for that fascinating introduction and explanation of neurodiversity and introduction to the various case cameos that we saw there. Now, we do have around 10 minutes available for questions. So if anyone would like to ask anything, please do type your questions into the question box now, and we'll try and take as many of them as we possibly can. While I'm waiting for questions to come through, can I just say that unfortunately we had a lot of problems earlier with uploading the slides for today's presentation to the BDA website. Now I'm told that that difficulty has now been sorted out. So if anyone hasn't been able to access the slides through the handouts that were connected to the webinar today, then you will be able to go back to the web pages on the BDA website and access them there. So just to remind you, on the website you'll be able to access all of the different materials that Jenny's referred to this morning. There's the full range of neurodiversity profilers. There's an early years profiler, primary, secondary, post-16. Remember that these profilers are really designed to be completed in conjunction with a professional. But if you find that your school or your social work team are unaware of the neurodiversity profiler, then please draw it to their attention and suggest that it might be useful to complete it with them and alongside the child or the young person who's in your care. As I hope you've seen from the session today, there's lots of really invaluable information that can be gleaned from using the profiler. Also, you'll be able to download the training notes and materials from today's session. Now, that's particularly useful if you would like to run one of these sessions yourself for a group of parents and carers, and we certainly hope that that's something that you'll consider doing within your own parent and carer groups. You'll also be able to download the booklet of support strategies. The support strategies are listed according to different situations, school and learning situations, general behaviour at home, but at the back of the support strategies booklet, we've also listed strategies according to different specific learning differences. So that if you know, for example, that you are looking after a child who has shown dyslexic tendencies in the past, you can go to the list of support strategies that match up with dyslexia. But remember that slide that showed that specific learning differences do not occur in isolation. Don't expect every dyslexic child to be the same or every dyslexic child only to have difficulties in the areas of literacy. There may be co-occurring problems which overlap with dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, and so on. So always look for things that are more complicated than might appear on the surface. And of course, you will be able to download also, we hope now, the slides for today's session. Okay, well, I'm not getting any questions coming through. You're all being very quiet out there, guys.
Oh, no, I can see some questions, Liz.
Oh, Kath, have you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They're not coming through to me.
Ah, okay. So, can I help then?
Yeah, of course.
Foster carer with a child aged 9 has been recently diagnosed with ADD, sensory processing difficulties, and may also have dyslexia. So the question is that the child has an EHCP, and we have a personal educational plan meeting coming up. What are the key issues? Well, the key issue for me would be, how is the Pupil Premium Plus being used to utilise support for your particular child? So there is additional money funding from the government, and it's important to know how that's being used and the progress and impact those choices have been, the choice in terms of intervention is making. So one would hope that there are evidence-based interventions in place. Another question is from Becky. Becky, you're asking about a 7-year-old girl with learning difficulties, and you're asking about writing at home. Actually, the charity, the Handwriting Association, is well worth looking at. They have some excellent ideas. And I guess maybe setting up a little secretarial corner where you have things like hole punches and a stapler and lovely paper that she could enjoy using might just help get her started. There is a particular program called the Right Start program, which is an excellent resource that I would expect the school to have. So you could ask them if there are any particular types of ways that they're teaching handwriting, and perhaps you could support with that as an extra home activity.
Can I come in there just for a moment as well? The other thing that you could do, Becky, is to interest your daughter, your foster daughter, perhaps in doing a bit of touch typing and see if she takes to that. There's the marvelous BBC Dance Mat touch typing program, which is such fun. It's presented by a Liverpudlian goat, and it's great fun for kids and adults to learn to touch type. There's sometimes, if there are real difficulties with the physical side of writing, then doing some touch typing and using a keyboard can help overcome that as well. So that's a thought too.
Yes, good thinking.
Yeah. I can also,
sorry.
Jenny, no, go on.
Questions, Liz, or do you want me to take them?
I've spotted some more. I've got one down here from Sue asking if we issue a certificate for people who've attended. We don't unfortunately have a certificate, Sue, but what we can do is if you email us, we can send you an email confirming that you've been present at the webinar today. So just drop an email to Project A, who's been communicating with you, or at the end of your evaluation questionnaire, which you'll be sent out, just make a note that you'd like to be sent an email confirming your attendance. Can you see any other questions there, Jenny?
Yeah, interesting question from Debbie, quite a complex question really, in terms of very excellent support from school for a child with a complex mix of learning difficulties. However, these were attributed by social workers to being attachment issues, and therefore there wasn't a joined up approach to this. I wonder, had you all been able to look together at the profiler, whether it would have helped you all to see things through the same lens. So in future, maybe that's something you could nudge you all towards, a joint session looking at that, social worker, school and yourselves, and just clarifying where the areas of difficulty are. I think it's important to say that the profiler isn't a diagnostic tool, it just alerts us to possible need for further investigation. So good luck with that.
Yeah, I'd like to just second what Jenny's saying there. The really important thing about the profiler is it's not diagnostic. What it does is identify the strengths and the challenges that the child or the young person is experiencing. And in so doing, it gets away from this whole thing about labeling and the accusation of trying to label. What we want to achieve through the use of the profiler is identification of challenges so that support can be put in place without the need for a specific label being attached to a child. It's ridiculous, isn't it, to think that support is being withheld because somebody is accusing you of trying to label a child as dyslexic or dyspraxic or whatever. What is important is to say, this child is having difficulties with this certain area, so we need to put support in place. Debbie said, we were very lucky to come across a learning difficulty nurse who was amazing and changed our lives. Highly recommended if you can get access to one. And that's the problem, isn't it, Debbie? It's whether there's somebody available in your own particular area or not.
Yeah. Thank you, Gavin, for your thanks for the session and asking if we can have another one. That would be great, wouldn't it? To follow it up.
Well, we will certainly do our best. The session today has been funded by the Department for Education, to whom we would like to give our thanks. We are always hopeful that more funding from organisations such as the Department for Education will become available so that we can put out more support. But do please keep in touch with the PATOS website, the SpLD Trust website, the BDA website, our information site for parents and carers, which is called Dyslex.io. The Dyslex.io Facebook page is running a 3-week campaign currently, and there are lots of resources and information going out over the next 3 weeks. So do check that out. That again is Dyslex, DYSLEX.io Facebook, and you'll find lots of fantastic resources and information and links there. We will have to finish off today, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for attending. Please remember that there will be an evaluation questionnaire to complete afterwards, so we'd be very grateful if you could complete that. Also remember that a recording of the webinar will be made available on the BDA YouTube channel very shortly, so if you've enjoyed the webinar, please do recommend it to friends. And also remember that the training materials are there. They are free. They're out there for you to use with your parent carer groups. So please use them. That's what they're for. Thank you to Jenny again for a fantastic presentation and lots of really informative responses to questions. Thank you to Rebecca for facilitating the session today, and goodbye from us all. Thank you very much.